In this week's EV news, could green number plates actually serve a practical purpose if they were implemented properly? Could electric car adoption be putting front gardens in grave danger? Could self-driving electric cars mean the end for short-haul flights? And could wireless EV charging finally become a reality? Welcome back to another week of EV news. And first up, let's talk about a subject I have a pretty strong opinion on. Those green number plates. As I'm sure you know by now, I think the government's rollout of green badge number plates for zero emissions vehicles is a massive waste of time, money and effort that achieves little more than the ability to let people show off the fact that they've managed to get themselves in a load of debt to rent a shiny new car. Not a single council in the UK has, as of yet, introduced any incentives using those plates. And a big reason for that is probably because they're not compulsory and they're available to pretty much anyone with no real checks being carried out. You can pretty much get one for any car you like. And in fact, a load of dealers are actually fitting them to plug-in hybrids, which they shouldn't be doing. But could they actually serve a practical purpose though? Over in Queensland, Australia, it is now mandatory for all electric cars to have a tag on the number plate showing emergency services that that vehicle is electric. And special precautions need to be taken in the event of an accident. And I've heard some people in the UK say that this is the justification for the green plates here, but it's not. They're not mandatory, remember, you don't need to have them. But let's take a look at this Australian news article, a link to which is in the description as always. Eugene Reichman believes the risk of his new electric car electrocuting someone is likely to be very low. The car is touted amongst the community as being probably the safest vehicle on the market in terms of crash survivability of the occupants, he said. But he was surprised to find his new car needs warning labels. It was just an annoyance, more so than anything else, he said. I bought the car from a dealer. The dealer should have told me. The registration papers that I received should have mentioned that there needs to be a tag on the number plate on these things. Electric or hydrogen-powered vehicles built after January the 1st, 2019, or an existing vehicle that was modified to be electric or hydrogen-powered after that date will need small blue warning tags displayed on the number plates from October. Queensland's Department of Transport and Main Roads said this was so emergency services do not get a shock when responding to crashes involving electric cars. The battery power packs in these vehicles can kill someone. They have that much power in them, TMR Safety and Regulation General Manager Andrew Mahan said. So we've got to make sure that we look after our emergency services personnel when they're doing the thing that we want them to do, which is save people's lives, and make sure that everyone's safe at the scene of an accident. The reflective tags may seem small, but firefighters say it helps them identify at a glance that they're dealing with a car that has a powerful battery. It's an easy identifier, so we don't have to go around and try to find a vehicle badge or something that says it's hybrid or an electric vehicle, Station Officer Paul Omansky said. It's interesting stuff, isn't it? It seems that they're very much applying the same logic over there that some people do to the green number plates we've got here in the UK. The big flaw over here, of course, they're not currently mandatory. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you think in the comments. Would it be a good idea to force everybody to have the green plates rather than them being voluntary so that emergency services could be aware that it was an electric car or it had an electric drivetrain? Or is it more likely that emergency services personnel would actually use other data sources to determine what they were dealing with when they arrive on a scene? The same article, if you do read it, it goes on to talk about an app that the emergency services can use, which gives them information about a car and where potential isolation points are and stuff like that. So do you even need the tags on the number plates at all? I don't know, it's a difficult one really. But maybe they do have a little bit more of a practical purpose than what I've been giving them credit for. I still think the implementation's a load of crap, and I still think there's a long way to go. But it is interesting that in another country, they're very much saying that you've got to have these tags on your number plates so that the emergency services can recognise electric vehicles. It's not something we've really thought of over here yet in terms of at a government level, but I wonder if that will be how they will finally become mandatory. Time will tell. Our next news story this week takes us to Alan Titchmarsh. You know, that guy who used to make over people's gardens in the early 2000s. So, you replace your petrol or diesel car with a nice, clean electric one, doing a good deed for the environment. Well, what if, in order to charge that car, you're going to have to pave over some of your garden to squeeze the car onto your land to get it where you can charge it? According to Alan, if we all block pave our front gardens, we're paving our way to disaster. A motorist who replaces their petrol or diesel car with a clean electric one may feel they have done their bit to help the planet. But what if it involves ripping up the flowers and shrubs in their front garden to accommodate a parking space cum charging bay? Powering up overnight at home is both cheaper and more convenient than using commercial chargers, as we all know. And as EV sales take off, the government is encouraging drivers to charge their cars at home to accelerate the switch to zero emissions motoring. And as we all know, there is no substitute for a home charger. If you can have one, you should have one. New research from the REC Foundation shows that 18 million out of 27.6 million households have the space to create a charging bay at home. But it warns that in the process, front gardens, millions of which have already been converted into barren parking spaces, may be consigned to history. Steve Gooding, the Foundation's director, said, "The convenience of home charging is good, the price could be good, but let's think about the unintended consequences." Now, when I first saw this headline, I thought it was a joke. And to be honest with you, I thought it was the usual anti-EV tripe that we always see. But it turns out it was not quite as bad as I thought it was. Titchmarsh has an ingenious solution, redesigning our front gardens with 2 narrow strips of paving for the wheels and a carpet of thyme, heathers, rock roses, variegated ivy and sedum, which can grow happily underneath the car. He said the thing about climate change is that most of us feel powerless, but instead of lobbying the G7, start by lobbying yourself. If everybody else did this, these green patches joined together to make an enormous patchwork quilt. So there you go. If you're creating a parking space in your front garden in order to charge your EV, just think about the local wildlife as you do so. Just make it a bit greener rather than paving over everything. Like I say, nowhere near as bad as I thought it was when I first saw the headline. And he's got a point, I think. Let's be a bit careful, a bit thoughtful before we start pouring concrete or putting block paving everywhere. Moving on, could self-driving cars spell the end of short-haul flights? This article from Forbes seems to think so. So let's take a look. Research from the BBC via BEIS and DEFRA revealed that flights on routes of 438 miles or less produce 29% more CO2 per person per mile travelled than longer flights. But going forward, self-driving battery electric vehicles could drastically reduce the need for this form of transport, or even render it obsolete and slash emissions in the process. The BBC research argued that a domestic flight would produce 254 grams per kilometre of CO2 per passenger, compared to 195 grams per kilometre for long haul. In contrast, even a diesel car emits just 171 grams per kilometre on average. Stick a family of 4 in it, and that drops to 43 grams per kilometre. People don't choose their transportation based on carbon footprint that much yet, even if that is changing. The reason short-haul flights are popular is speed. A flight from London to Edinburgh takes about an hour and a half. Even if you factor in another hour and a half to check in, an hour to get to the airport, another hour at the end to reach your final destination, it would still only be 5 hours in total. Driving it yourself, it takes 7.5 to 8 hours if you're lucky, and you probably need to stop somewhere halfway for a break. You would also be tired when you arrived, so it wouldn't be the best solution. If you're going to spend a day in meetings once you get there, if you're knackered because you've been driving all day, it's not ideal. I've got quite a lot of experience making that kind of journey, funnily enough, and I often found actually there was almost parity between flying and driving, time-wise. They're definitely 100% correct about the energy and about you being really tired after you drive, but time-wise, I don't think there's actually as much in it as they're saying. Messing around in airports, it absolutely is a time drain, and although you'll be less tired by the time you get there, you'll arguably be more stressed. But of course, trains can be extremely low carbon as well, but they're generally slower than flying. Going back to that BBC report, domestic rail is 41 grams per kilometre per passenger, and the Eurostar from London to Paris an incredible 6 grams per kilometre. But in the UK and other parts of the world, trains are an expensive form of transport, often more than flying, and you still have the inconvenience of having to go to a station in order to take a train. That probably won't take as long as going to an airport and having to check in, go through security and all that, but it will add a couple of hours to the trip. So the 4.5 hour train journey from London to Edinburgh might take about the same time door to door as driving, and a few hours more than flying eventually takes. This is where self-driving electric cars could dramatically alter the balance here. So in theory, a battery electric vehicle emits 0 grams per kilometre, as we know, although that entails using entirely renewable energy. So let's say we're sticking with the UK in that London to Edinburgh journey, but we'll use the average UK grid emissions balance. Last year, the UK national grid averaged 181 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. It's greenest year yet. Most battery electric vehicles manage at least 3 miles per kilowatt hour and some more than 4, but let's stick with 3 and that would give us 60 grams of CO2 per mile, 96 grams per kilometre. Put 4 people in the car and it drops to 24 grams per kilometre per person. In other words, much better than UK domestic rail. See, London to Edinburgh, just over 400 miles. It's beyond the range of a lot of current EVs, but then we do have some new entrants into the market, like the Mercedes EQS, which might just about manage it with its claimed 481 mile range, should it come to fruition. And you probably need a break at some point anyway, in which case the car could charge. Assuming an expensive 40p per kilowatt hour for rapid public charging, the journey would cost about £53. You can get London to Edinburgh flights that cheap, but most are at least twice the price. And generally they're considerably more. Book a train sufficiently advanced, it'll be cheaper, but otherwise it'll be more expensive as well. And if there's 4 people in the car, the electric car journey price will just be £13 per person, which no cheap rail ticket's ever going to match. Now factor in the self-driving. You choose short haul flying for the speed, and both flying and trains because you can do something else while you travel. A self-driving car will mean the same thing. You could work, watch a movie, read a book, eat or even sleep in transit. Plus, you don't need to go to and from an airport or train station at either end, you're just going direct, door to door in the car. That would likely offset the slightly longer journey time than flying, because you won't have any of the hassle of getting on and off a mass transit vehicle. In the case of an aircraft, having to check baggage, retrieve at your destination and all that stuff. You're likely to be much more relaxed when you finally arrive. Now, I couldn't agree more with this. Obviously, it's a completely hypothetical situation at the moment, but the idea of being able to travel long distance in comfort, not having to concentrate on driving, but also not having to go to an airport or train station, absolutely. Sign me up, 100%. I can't wait. Might be quite a while before it's reality, of course. And finally, speaking of things that might not quite be reality just yet, it looks like wireless EV charging might be about to become a reality, or at least in South Korea. Now, it sounds like something people have been talking about forever. Being able to just park up over a wireless charging pad, just like your phone, right? You just put it down and it starts charging, instead of having to mess around with wires plugging your car in. But it's never quite come to fruition, and that all might be about to change. Genesis makes some eye-catching and dynamic vehicles, and in 2022 the automaker will take that philosophy to the EV space with its GV60 SUV. But the big story with the car isn't its release or its design. Genesis says the GV60 will be offered with an optional wireless charging feature that can replenish its batteries faster than a typical home wall charger. Using technology provided by Witricity, an American firm, the GV60's optional wireless charging feature will take around 6 hours to recharge the batteries, compared to approximately 10 hours using a traditional wall charger. Witricity's estimates place the charging efficiency of its wireless systems to between 89 and 94%, around that of a level 2 AC charger. Genesis has not yet released official battery specs for the GV60, but most expect it to be at least 58 kilowatt hours, and a possibility of it being up to about 77. The vehicle goes on sale in South Korea later this year and will hit US dealers sometime in 2022. Even so, Genesis won't begin piloting the wireless charging feature in South Korea until late 2022, which means it will be quite some time before other global markets get to try it out. Depending on the implementation, a wireless charging pad could be easier to slot into existing parking lots, such as for apartment owners who don't have dedicated garage space, or for owners whose home parking space makes it inconvenient or impossible to install a wall charger. Speeds claimed by Genesis and Witricity are impressive, and as they run counter to what many people believe about wirelessly charging anything. So just look at wireless phone charging, it is slower than the wired alternative. And Yet obviously they're claiming we can charge cars faster than the wild alternatives, so it'd be very interesting to see what happens in that space. This isn't the first time we've heard about wireless car charging. BMW released a limited run of wireless charging pads for a specific plug-in hybrid model back in 2018. And chipmaker Qualcomm has its own Halo wireless car charging technology, which was used to recharge the safety and medical cars at Formula E races back in 2014. Despite this technology having been around for years, it's yet to ingrain itself in consumer vehicles. Now, okay, it might still be a long way away, and it's a bit of a pipe dream in reality, but I do like the idea. Being able to charge without faffing about the cables would be great, wouldn't it? Should it ever become reality? Time will tell. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one, I don't think, but let me know what you think in the comments. And that's all we've got time for this week. Please click the like button if you've made it this far, and definitely subscribe if you haven't already. Many thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you soon.